Imagine yourself in darkness. Not the kind you flee from, the kind you endure. A darkness made not of fear, but of routine. You wake before the sun rises. There are no bells, only the shifting weight of the air as night pulls back from the earth. You fold your sleeping mat, cold, rough, quiet, and you prepare to walk the length of your life again. Your post is not in a battlefield or in a temple. It is in the lower level of a provincial prison, not far from the outer walls of a Han Dynasty fortress. The halls are made of stone. The air is thick, even in winter. Moisture clings to your robe. You feel it settle into your joints. There are bamboo doors, lashed with twisted rope. The bars creak softly when they shift. Each door must be inspected twice before midday. Each prisoner counted, recorded, observed. You carry no sword, only a short staff, a ring of wooden keys, and a book of names. The ink has begun to fade from the edges. You are not supposed to speak with the prisoners, but you sometimes do, softly, without expression. Some have not spoken to anyone in months. One man hums. One woman scratches characters into the stone with her fingernail. One child simply stares. Your duties include checking water levels, bringing meals, and reporting changes. A change might mean illness, it might mean escape, it might mean death. Each must be noted on a slip of bamboo, which is passed to a senior scribe by evening. If you forget, you will be punished. If you speak falsely, you may be dismissed. If you show compassion, they may simply replace you. The prisoners are not all criminals. Some are poets who displeased an official. Some are merchants who spoke too freely. Some are rebels. Some are innocent. But guilt is not your concern, only obedience. The rules are clear. Do not allow escape. Do not change your route. Do not speak of what you see. If a prisoner dies during your shift, you must wait. You are not to remove the body until an official visits the next morning. You must guard it all night. There are guards who have gone mad doing this. There are others who stare for hours, unmoving. There is a story whispered but never written of a guard who began speaking to the dead. They say he bowed when he entered empty cells. They say he still walks the corridor though he was buried long ago. You don't believe this, but when you walk that section, you walk a little faster. A day inside, the rhythm of a Han Dynasty prison guard. There is a kind of silence that only exists underground. It is not peaceful. It is not ominous. It simply is. You wake on your straw mat. The air is cool, damp. You've stopped noticing the moisture it touches. Everything here. Your robe, your scrolls, even your bones. There is no ladder to climb, no ambition to chase, only a rhythm to maintain, preserved like a brittle root, dry, colorless, enduring. Before your shift, you perform a quiet ritual. You wash your hands. You take 4 slow breaths. You touch the carved talisman in your sleeve. You don't know if it protects you, but you're still here. You descend the corridor to the lower chambers. No lanterns yet, just the familiar slope under your feet and the sound of keys brushing against one another in your hand. Each cell has a story. Each key remembers it. At the threshold of the main block, you paused, asked a breath, just a bow, not to anyone, to the weight of the place itself. The corridor stretches ahead, stone walls darkened by time, bamboo doors creaking in place. You begin the count, 32 men, 8 women, 3 children. You do not ask names. You only confirm presence. Some stare, some sing, some press their foreheads to the stone and don't move at all. There is one who always laughs when he sees you. You don't know why. He's been here longer than you. He has no teeth. He smells like wet dust. You mark your observations in the daily scroll. A cough, a new scratch on a wall. Your job is not to interfere, only to notice. At midday, you serve millet and pickled roots. If there is salted fish, it means the prison is solvent this month. You pass each bowl through the grate, without speaking. You eat alone, in the archive room, among scrolls and silent. You like the way the paper smells old ink and ash. Some days, you read files from decades past. Other days, you trace the handwriting of men long gone. It reminds you that there is a shape to things, even in places like this. The sun dips behind thick walls. The air cools. Condensation forms on the doors. You begin your second round. Slower, more careful. Sometimes, the walls creak in patterns you can't explain. Sometimes, the sound of your steps is not the only one. You pass cell 17 quickly. Not for any reason you recall. Just instinct. There are stories, after all. A prisoner who vanished through stone. A woman who cried until the locks melted. A former guard who still walks the hall, though he was buried last winter. You do not believe these stories, but you walk the long way around anyway. Night comes. You are not allowed to sleep. You sit by the brazier, watching the glow fade to ember. You recite the day's names in your head. You check the record scroll again, though nothing has changed. And sometimes, when all else is still, you let your eyes close. Not to rest, not to dream, but to disappear just for a breath, before the silence begins again. Some stories are too quiet to be written. They are passed along in glances. Remembered, this is one of them. It was during the reign of Emperor Jing of Han, a time of balance. Taxes were low, the bureaucracy stable, yet even peace has its hidden corners. In a remote province, far from the capital, a guard worked in silence. He had no title of honor, no particular flaw or virtue. He simply endured. Every morning, he followed the same route. Same keys, same names, same breath before the corridor, until he was assigned to cell 11. The man inside was not like the others. He spoke to no one. He sat cross-legged from sunrise to sunset. He ate little, and he watched. Without watching, the others called him a Taoist hermit, arrested for refusing to pay tribute, or perhaps for saying too much to the wrong official, or perhaps nothing at all. He never gave his name. The guard watched him daily, not with suspicion, just presence, as one might watch the moon over many nights. Always there, always distant. One morning, after a stormy night, the latch to cell 11 stuck. The door had swollen from dampness. The guard forced it closed. He did not test it again. That evening, when he returned with a water bowl, the cell was empty. The mat was still in place, the walls untouched. No rope, no digging, no noise, only absence. He called, no alarm. He reported it directly. A scribe came. 2 magistrates followed. They examined the door, they made notes, and then they left. No punishment came. No fine, nothing. He continued his work. The same route, the same bow at the corridor. But others noticed. They spoke less around him. Some avoided him entirely. They began referring to cell 11 by number, only never by name. 1 month later, an old man arrived, wearing a scholar's robe. He asked for no one. He stayed only minutes. Before leaving, he bowed at the archive room and placed a small carved stone on the step. The guard retrieved it that night. One side bore the Taigi Xi'an and Yang, the other held a poem. What leaves without opening, returns without sound. The door is not the keeper. The keeper is not the door. He never spoke of it. But he kept the stone in his sleeve. He remained in the prison for many years. He followed protocol. He aged quietly, until one day, his name no longer appeared on the scrolls. No one replaced him, and cell 11, though still present, was never again opened. After the escape, the days continued, but they were no longer the same. No one spoke of the incident directly. The scribe asked for clarification. The magistrates stopped visiting that corridor, but the rhythm changed. The other guards now walked more quickly past cell 11. Some avoided the western wing entirely during the evening shift. No one lit a lantern near the door. The empty cell remained clean, as if still occupied. A bowl of water was placed outside once a week, then quietly removed untouched. The guard never explained himself. No one demanded it, but his steps became slower. He stopped visiting the archive room. He began sleeping closer to the door of the corridor, not out of fear, but to listen. Some nights, he thought he heard the faint rustle of robes, not walking, not movement, just presence. One night, during his watch, a paper slipped under the main door, unmarked, thin. Inside was a single brushstroke. Placed it inside the carved stone box where he now kept the talisman and the poem. The Huist never returned. No sign of him was ever found. And yet, the feeling of incompletion never left. Because perhaps the escape wasn't really an escape. Perhaps it was a shift, from body to wind, from form to gesture, from history to myth. The guard aged, his duties lightened. He was reassigned to record-keeping, fewer rounds, less time underground. He no longer bowed before entering the prison. He simply stood still for a moment, long enough to be forgotten by the world above. 1 year before his death, he returned to cell 11 for the last time. He did not enter. He sat outside, with the stone in his hand, the poem in his mind, and a question in his chest that had never needed answering. Before leaving, he scratched a single line into the base of the doorframe. It said, "Not forgotten, not kept. And then he walked away. After his death, the stone box was buried with him. At his request, no incense was burned, no eulogy read, only silence, the same kind he had kept for decades. In time, the world forgets most escapes, but the people who witness them never do. After the prisoner vanished, the guard's life slowed, but never stopped. He continued to carry keys, to mark scrolls, to sit in silence beside flickering lanterns. But something inside him had shifted. He began noticing the things he had once ignored, the way wind moved through the narrow corridor like a breath, the faint smell of incense clinging to a stone wall, though no incense had burned, the tiny inscription scratched behind the basin in the washing room. Water remembers everything. He began visiting the shrine outside the prison gate, not daily, only on cloudy mornings. He left no offerings. He only stood there, eyes half closed, as if waiting for something to arrive without arriving. And in those quiet minutes, he thought about the Taoist not with regret, not with fear, but with a kind of unfinished understanding, because the man had left no trace, no thread unraveled, no guards punished, no rumors spread beyond the walls. It was as if he had been written in chalk and gently erased, and yet the feeling remained that something had passed through his life that did not belong to the normal rhythm of duty. Something outside of punishment, outside of pardon. One day, an official from the capital arrived for inspection. Young, stern, the type who straightened scrolls as if they were lines of soldiers. He questioned the staff with sharp words. He asked about the prison's record-keeping, cell conditions, chain of command. When he came to the western corridor, he pointed to cell 11. "Why is it sealed?" No one replied. He asked again. The senior scribe gave a practiced answer. Structural weakness. Awaiting assessment. It was not a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. The official frowned, then moved on. Later, the guard approached the scribe. He didn't ask about the excuse. He only said. The scribe nodded. "Some things," he said, "are not meant to be reopened." That night, the guard returned to the archive room. He brought ink, fresh paper, a brush, and for the first time in many years, he began to write, not a report, not a record, but a memory. He described the morning fog, the door's quiet hinge, the feeling of presence, the stone left at the threshold, the circle drawn in one stroke. He signed it with no name, folded it, tied it with red thread, and placed it inside a hollow cavity in the wall behind the older scrolls. He did not return to it. He continued working quietly until his final year. When he passed, the stone box was buried in the northern quarter, as he had requested. Some say a tree now grows there, though no one remembers who planted it. Its leaves are pale, its trunk curved like a question, and cell 11 remains sealed. Its door still bowed slightly inward, as if it were waiting to be opened not by a hand, but by time itself. Now, let the story fade. Let the names slip into the past. Let silence settle again, and follow the path downward, not through memory, but through stone. Beneath the modern city of Xi'an, under the rhythm of traffic and blinking lights, lie corridors that have no names on the maps, tunnels, cells, chambers of still air. Some were built during the Han Dynasty, others reshaped over centuries, some forgotten completely, until the earth was disturbed. Construction workers digging foundations, engineers laying pipe, a wall that wasn't supposed to be there, a room that shouldn't have existed, and yet it did. Rectangular in shape, 3 meters long, one window no larger than a hand, scratches on the interior surface, not words, just marks. The air was heavier inside, as if time had thickened there. Historians believe these were holding cells not for punishment, but for containment, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for years. Not cages, not pits, rooms, walled, numbered. Hidden archaeologists found remnants, fragments of ceramic bowls, hair fibers, a piece of hemp rope coiled in a corner, and once a bamboo strip, half preserved, with just 2 brushstrokes. One character meaning quiet, the other closed. No date, no signature, just the shape of a thought left behind. Some chambers bore iron rings embedded in the stone, used perhaps to shackle or to anchor. Others contained ventilation slits angled carefully so that air passed, but no light. In one cell, beneath a thin layer of sediment, they found a shallow engraving of a fish. No one knows who drew it or why. But the lines were careful, not decorational expression. These spaces were not made for spectacle. They were not public courts. They were not gallows. They were meant to be forgotten. And yet, as always, the stone remembered. Modern teams use ground-penetrating radar to detect voids beneath older buildings. Most are natural, but occasionally a square space appears, geometrically perfect, aligned to no street above. And so the questions begin again. Who was held there? Why is there no record? What did they think, in the dark? Some scholars suggest these prisons were used for political detention. Others, for philosophers or monks who strayed too close to forbidden truths. Still others believe they were private cells, maintained by noble families in times of scandal. The truth is not loud. It rests beneath meters of soil, unmoving. Some of the chambers have been resealed, out of respect, out of uncertainty, not because they are cursed, but because they feel unfinished, like a sentence left open, like a breath held too long. Visitors are rarely allowed into these spaces. They remain behind gates, inside museums, or beneath government sites. But sometimes, at night, if you walk the older streets of Xi'an, you may notice a low vibration in the pavement, a change in the air, a corner where sound behaves differently, and if you pause, you might sense it. A presence below. Not a ghost, not a memory, just a structure waiting. Archaeology is not about what is found, it's about what refuses to be lost. When workers unearthed one of the oldest chambers near Xi'an's southern gate, they found a floor worn smooth, not by footfall, but by the slow erosion of presence. There were no chains, no skeletons, just an imprint, a dip in the stone, as if someone had sat in the same spot for a very long time. In the far wall, behind a layer of dust, there was a single vertical line carved in the stone, deep, sharp, deliberate. A prisoner's calendar, a final act of defiance, or merely the last gesture of a forgotten hand, no one can say. In another chamber, adjacent and far less intact, archaeologists uncovered what appeared to be a drainage groove, but it didn't connect to any system. It led to a hollowed-out basin in the corner, just large enough to hold water. Some believe it was part of a ritual cleansing, a place where prisoners, before being judged or executed, were bathed in silence. And on the wall above that basin, a single word remained. Stillness. Not all of these underground spaces were for punishment. Some may have served as holding rooms for courtiers under suspicion, not condemned, not yet, simply removed from sight and made to wait. In the hand court, silence was often used as a form of control. Silence of place, silence of name, silence of punishment. A scribe once wrote, "The emperor does not always remove his enemies. Sometimes he simply forgets them more thoroughly than death." And so these chambers may not be tombs, but acts of erasure. In a preserved corner near the ancient city, well, a group of symbols was found etched in clay tile. They form no known text, no list, no prayer, but when traced in order, they follow the curve of a breathing cycle. In, hold, out, hold. Whoever made them likely never left, but they left behind something more durable than words. Pattern, intent, awareness. These are not rooms filled with suffering. They are containers of time. The deeper you go, the quieter the earth becomes, but the more it listens. And when you stand above them today, in the middle of a street, or near a shop, or at the foot of an old alley wall, you might not hear anything, but the stillness is shaped. It has weight. It is watching, not haunting, not warning, just remembering. And when you walk away, you may feel as though something stayed behind to continue listening in your place. Let us now leave the stone corridors. Let the dampness fade. Let order replace shadow. We enter the world of the imperial court, not a palace, but a quiet room where justice is performed like a ceremony. The magistrate sits on a raised platform. His robes are dark, simple, but heavy with meaning. Each fold pressed, each motion intentional. He holds no sword. He speaks softly. Power here does not shout. It balances. Behind him are scrolls, each one a case, each name a life waiting to be judged. The courtroom is arranged by design. Distance matters. Direction matters. Even the number of steps between the accused and the desk follows the rules of ritual geometry. Everything is meant to restore balance, not to punish for the sake of pain, but to realign what has slipped out of place. The Confucian model of law was moral, not mechanical. It asks, what restores harmony? what teaches virtue. And so, many punishments were symbolic. A merchant who lied might be made to sweep the market square, not as humiliation, but as a gesture of social repair. A scribe who erred might copy the Book of Rights by hand, not as punishment, but as pure. The judge's assistant stands silently behind him. One holds a brush, one a rod. The brush is for writing the sentence. The rod is for carrying it out, but both are used with care, never in anger. Justice is not impulsive. It is measured breath. The courtroom is not always just, but it is always formal. Even when mistakes are made, they are wrapped in ritual, sealed in protocol. Some judges fast before pronouncing a severe sentence. Others burn incense. Some write the final name in red ink, a color reserved for decisions that cannot be undone. It is not drama. It is not spectacle. It is the state, speaking with precise stillness. Judges lived humbly. They studied the classics. They believed that to judge others, one must first discipline oneself. A judge once wrote, "I rule not by law, but by breath held steady." And so, while prisoners lived in forgotten stone, judges lived by visible structure. Two halves of the same empire, one that buried, one that wrote, and, between them, the lives they shaped. Justice, in the eyes of the Han Dynasty, was not a blade, but a brushstroke. The courtroom itself was a stage. But the stage was quiet, no shouting, no gongs, no dramatic pronouncements, just the echo of footsteps, the scratch of ink, the soft murmur of citation from classical texts. In this space, the magistrate was both performer and guardian. He did not merely rule, he demonstrated balance. When he sat, he adjusted his robes 3 times. He touched his brush to ink only after silence. He paused before reading names aloud. These gestures were deliberate, because the purpose of justice was not only to punish, but to educate the soul of the state. The foundation of this world was Confucianism, but not the philosophy of scholars debating in temples. This was ritual Confucianism, practical, moral, and deeply performative. Every element had meaning. The color of the judge's belt signaled his rank. The number of tiles between the defendant and the desk determined the gravity of the charge. Even the temperature of the tea served during deliberation held weight. Hot for urgency, warm for mercy. And yet, not all decisions were guided by scrolls. There was room for discretion. Moments when a judge would close his eyes, run a finger along the bamboo slip, and decide not based on code, but on pattern. A merchant who lied to a noble might receive lashes, but a boy who stole rice for his siblings, he might be assigned to sweep the court hall for 3 seasons. Each stroke of the broom seen as a form of Some punishments were symbolic. One woman, accused of seducing her neighbor's husband, was not exiled or beaten, but forced to wear a blue veil in public for 2 months. Blue, the color of honesty. Veil, the symbol of what must be unseen. In another case, a scribe who falsified a ledger was not imprisoned but required to write the Book of Rights by hand, 20 times, every day, before dawn. By the end, his ink-stained hands trembled, but his calligraphy had improved. Judges lived modestly, but their lives were rich in books, incense, and ritual. They drank tea in silence. They practiced brushwork. They copied the classics, not for prestige, but to remind themselves that authority begins in discipline. One judge, recorded in the provincial scrolls of Shu, kept a private garden with only 3 plants: a crooked pine, a white chrysanthemum, and a bamboo stalk tied at its base. He once wrote in his journal, "Let the pine remind me to resist. Let the chrysanthemum remind me to remain pure. Let the bamboo remind me that strength bends, not breaks." Justice, in that world, moves slowly, by candlelight, by rhythm, by breath. A mistake could take a day to correct, a verdict, a lifetime to forget. But the system endured, because behind every law was a brush, and behind every brush a hand, and behind every hand, a person who was, themselves, bound by silence. And so the prisons below, and the courts above, formed a perfect contrast. Below, shadows, stone, secrets. Above, ritual, ink, performance. But both were part of the same body, the same empire, the same silence worn differently, and scroll, through keys and ink, along the quiet lines that once held lives in place. You stood in the shadow of the prison wall, where silence weighed more than words. You followed the footsteps of a man who disappeared without sound and left behind only a shape in thought. You descended into the earth beneath, where forgotten rooms held nothing but time. and perhaps something more. And you rose again into the orderly stillness of the court, where justice was not shouted, but performed in brushstroke, in ritual, in silence. In all these places, above ground and below, within power and without, one thing endured: the discipline of quiet structure, a rhythm so measured, so subtle, it could only be felt when everything else stopped moving. History remembers its emperors and wars, its inventions, its scrolls, its revolutions, but what holds it together are the invisible hands, the ones that turned keys, that coppered names, that sat through the long dark without ever being seen. Hands like yours, perhaps, if you had been born in another time, another place. And now you may let the story go, let the keys fall silent, let the court dissolve, let the weight of stone fade back into the earth. You are here, in your own bed, breathing, and the silence that surrounds you now is not the silence of a cell, or a courtroom, or a tomb. It is a silence that comforts, that holds, that forgets nothing, but demands nothing. It is yours, and you may rest in it, as they once did. Quietly, completely. Good night.